Welcome to the Silicon Fox podcast, where we explore the habits and stories of high performers. I'm your host, Mitchell Eschner. Well, Jim, thank you so much for hopping on the Silicon Fox podcast.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and love your traction and love your enthusiasm. So I'm looking forward to this.
I appreciate it. Well, look, I always love to start these by just giving you the chance to tell us a little bit about your story as we I'll navigate the rest myself, but really just kind of giving you the chance to tell us who you are so we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I say I'm a serial entrepreneur. I grew up in a family where my dad retired from the military and became an entrepreneur after that. He was very enthusiastic, probably not the best entrepreneur, but he instilled in me a desire to want to go do my own thing. Had a military stint after grad school, had a corporate stint at places like Kraft Foods, managing Jello pudding, and places like Coca-Cola, developing new brands. But in early 2001, wanted to finally take the leap. And since then, I've been an entrepreneur in a series of businesses. That first business was a company called I Go You Go. We won a Webby Award as the top travel site in the US in 2005, sold that to Travelocity. And then that enabled me to be an entrepreneur full time with a little bit of money in the bank. And I've done a series of things sort of in 5 to 8 year cycles. I'm a big believer that humans kind of become a different person every 5 to 8 years. Maybe not a different person, but the phase of their life is a little different. That's why school's 4 or 5 years. That's kind of your kids are in elementary school, then they're in this and that. And, you're married for 4 or 5 years before you have kids. And so I could go on and on. So I've tried to do the things that were super important to me at that phase of my life. Interestingly, the last 20 years have been a series of things in experiential retail, primarily built around health, wellness, and fitness. Probably best known as the founder of Restore Hyper Wellness, restores in 40 states, 250 locations at this point. When I stepped down 3 years ago, we were at a little over 200 locations, and building that from scratch was quite lovely. But once again, I had three things happen. And those things were the seminal things that made me want to do something different. So number one, we had just taken a huge private equity investment from General Atlantic. And even though they were a minority investor, it changes the dynamic of how you run your company completely. And that amount of money changes sort of the way people think about things. And so I like to say I've kind of stayed true to my compass, and that compass is that I'm a founder. I like to create things. And so I'm probably not the guy to run a company at year 8 that's trying to optimize. I want to be a builder. The second thing that happened to me is my dad died of cancer. I firmly believe that if I had had HumanHut at the time, I could have saved him, not because we would have cured his cancer, but we would have found it in stage 1 instead of stage 3. And so Restore just didn't go far enough, and I wanted to do more in the health space. And then I got run over by a drunk driver, a guy going through a red light
Oh,
at
wow.
65. I was through a green light at 65, and it destroyed me for a little while. For about a year, I was miserable. My neck, my chest, my shoulder were kind of, severely damaged. And it wasn't until I found stem cells and did a stem cell treatment that it brought me back to maybe even better than before. I've now done stem cells throughout my entire body, every joint, and I feel like I'm 25 years younger in terms of the way my knees feel and my Achilles and my shoulders. And so that was an eye opener. And so when you process all that together, you say, oh, great, now I got to turn that into a business. And that's what HumanHut became. HumanHut became this higher level medical offering that is focused on what we call health optimization. Health optimization is something that goes really deep into all the data around your body and then creates personalized care plans around all the foundational aspects of health: movement, nutrition, sleep, stress, cognitive health. And then we pull in a toolbox that has all the cool stuff: hormones, peptides, prescriptions, supplements, regenerative medicine, i.e., stem cells, and many other treatments in the clinics. And we're sort of a three-pronged business. We have a clinic portion of our business, we have a telehealth portion of our business, and we have an e-commerce platform that we're rolling out over the next couple of weeks. And the idea is to be the first scaled national brand in health optimization, open 100 clinics by 2030, have a very large telehealth business, e-commerce business, and all with the idea of democratizing health optimization and longevity.
I love it. I love it. It's a it's a clear path progression and kind of leading to this thing, and I'm super bullish in this space. I'm glad more and more people, especially people that have clearly done the right things, end up in this space. But I think like the most fun and what I was really looking forward to this episode is breaking down like the business aspect of a lot of these kinds of businesses and seeing how this wellness economy actually gets monetized and then sustains itself over the course of time and where we actually provide value. So kind of to kick it off, I'm just curious, what do you think that most people get wrong in the business of health and wellness, and where have we seen it? Because I think right now in this space we see a lot of noise, and so I'm just trying to disseminate between that as we kind of get deeper into what does it take to build a great business here and scale it. What have you seen people get wrong when starting it out?
I think there's two or three things. Number one, I think this idea that longevity is the word and the idea, when really I think that's a little off. Longevity is out in the future. Longevity is 20, 30 years out, maybe more depending on your age. So really, I think the bigger picture idea is to focus on health optimization today. So not in years down in the future, but today you're better. You perform better, you feel better, you're a better person. By the way, doing that day after day, week after week, month after month, that is what leads to health span and longevity. So I just think people kind of think of the thing out in the future too much rather than really optimizing today, number one. Number two, I think the sort of powers that be, the companies, the entrepreneurs in this space have made it feel a little inaccessible. They've made it feel like it's for Silicon Valley rich guys, and
Yeah.
they're the ones pursuing longevity and doing all this crazy weird stuff. The reality of it is, it's not crazy weird stuff. Most of the things you do in health optimization are affordable, accessible, and many times free. It doesn't cost anything to sleep better. It doesn't cost anything to go for a walk. Doesn't cost anything. Matter of fact, it can be cheaper to eat better, not drink a bunch of alcohol. I mean, there are things that, if you think about it, it's actually very accessible. So that's the other thing. And then I also think that people underestimate the complexity of it. And so there are a lot of people in the space that have no business being in the space. This is a highly regulated business with lots of compliance. There's a ton of complexity. You have to be disciplined from a marketing perspective and not overpromise. You got to do things the right way. And I just think there are a lot of folks chasing a dollar and not necessarily doing it the right way. And I always say, when you're small, no one cares. No one gives a damn when you're small. They
Yeah.
care when you start to get a little bigger and or you hurt somebody. And if you're not doing things the right way in this space, you can't hurt somebody, and that will bring the wrath of the powers that be onto the category. And when you get big, people notice. And I always say, if you're not practicing how to do it well when you're small, you won't do it well when you're large. And so those are probably the three buckets of things I see in the space.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we'll at some point see some reversion back to just core things of eat well, sleep well,
Yeah.
because we're obviously in the era of over optimization to some degree, but as more and more research comes out, I'm sure we'll see exciting things. One thing that I'm constantly afraid of, if you will, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, thinking that that it's kind of a luxury Silicon Valley rich guy industry. Do you fundamentally think it's not that in disguise? Do you think like there really is a preventative healthcare future that's truly democratized? Does it become kind of like either what you guys are building, or it turns into like a PCP type approach? How does it become such a thing where it is democratized and we do have everyday people taking peptides and whatever else that there is out there that's kind of towards the elites right now?
I think it's inevitable that it becomes democratized. I say to our team and I say to the world, scale matters. As you get scale, you can do things that you can't do when you're small. And so, obviously, you have more pricing power, you have more power with suppliers. There's a whole bunch of things you can do that that are harder when you're small. And some of the choices we've made, for instance, we do have some high-end products. We have a concierge membership. That concierge membership, to be quite frank, allows us to spend time and effort on the lower cost memberships that are more accessible. So, there are a variety of paths to get to democratization, but I do think it's inevitable. It's too important. It's too obvious. And once again, it's not all the cool one-off stuff. We approach it like this. The first 80 to 90% of it is the foundational stuff: movement, nutrition, sleep, stress reduction, cognitive health. That should be accessible to everybody. Now, once you get there are some quote unquote cool things and things that are probably more the purvey of people with more money. I can name 100 things in the space that, but I always say those things don't matter if you haven't done the first 80%. Like, I always tell the story, and it sounds derivative because I think Peter Attia used the similar example in his book, but this is a true story. I had a friend come to me and say, "Hey, I read about rapamycin, and I'd really like to get a prescription. And can you get your doctor to do that?" And I said, "Well, I could, but I'm not gonna." And he was like, "Come on, dude, what are you talking about?" I said, "Listen, man, I'm your friend. You're 40 pounds overweight. Guess what? You tell me about your sleep. You don't sleep well. I haven't seen you in the gym in 2 years. You're not moving." It's like, you don't need rapamycin. You need all of this other stuff. Rapamycin is like a finger in a dam that's about to bust, and you're focused on the wrong things. And so that's a hard conversation with people sometimes. And you have to meet them where they're at, and you have to not expect too much too fast. You got to bring them along. You got to make progress quickly, and you got to build on that progress. You got to get them in a virtuous cycle of the more you do, the better you feel, the better you feel, the more you do. You can't start at the pinnacle when someone hasn't been doing anything. And I think that's the kind of thinking that has made HumanHut more interesting, more accessible, and more effective. And we can at some point get into some of the effectiveness metrics in terms of health outcomes. But you know, we feel strongly about our approach.
Yeah, so to push on this a little bit, so part of what I mean in democratization is, yeah, the financial aspect, right? A lot of these things are expensive, and clearly, like, the foundational ones are not at all. But there's also the caveat of, like, one, education, and two, the user behavior change. I think, like, I
Yep.
kind of split those into two categories. One is, yeah, education. So, like, that's a really big component here. Is, maybe you and I are talking about this, and we fundamentally agree that a lot of it's really good for you and healthy, but across the masses, we're seeing, like, some reversion towards health and don't consume. I think there's been this, like, big metabolic crisis, popularization, but beyond that, we don't see nearly as much. And so, one is, how do we democratize knowledge, and how do you guys go about thinking in that perspective? But the second is also the behavior change. Yeah, we work in the wearable space, so we talk a lot about wearables, think a lot about wearables. And the funniest question that we always get is, like, what did this actually change in you once you got your, Whoop, Aura, whatever else? These are great businesses that are doing really, really well in the business world, but the often common feedback is like, "Oh, maybe for a week I really tried and I noticed that more alcohol means worse sleep, but it didn't change much." And there's not much actionable to change. Maybe, like, the algorithms are getting to a point where you can say, "Here's the optimal time to go to sleep," and not, you actually still have to follow that. So how do you think about that? How do you think about that from the user psychology perspective, or as you're building a business here, how do you think that plays out in the future, given these are pretty fundamental things that need to be changed for this business to grow?
Yeah, so those are big questions and multiple questions. So I'll start at the beginning. We talk about budgets, and people's budgets, and when we say budget, we don't just mean the financial part of a budget. We mean the sort of cognitive bandwidth that a person has. We mean the time they're willing to devote to something, the money that they have. It's a lot of things. And if you don't address all of those things, if you don't make the information more accessible and by the way, more engaging, and I would venture to say even fun, you can make healthcare more interesting, engaging, and fun. And by the way, if you don't do some of those things, people will not stick with it. Guess what people don't stick with? Things that are drudgery, things that aren't interesting, things that aren't fun, things that don't produce quick results. And so you have to factor that all in. And so for us, we think of ourselves as your co-pilot, and a lot of that is around the information. Like, it's a very complex space when you're talking about your overall health and wellness. Many different levers to pull, many different things to be an expert on. And I would say most of the quote unquote experts are actually only an expert in one small piece of it, and that's the problem. Everything's fragmented. So you bring in a HumanHut, and we are your co-pilot to navigate all of that. So it is about making that information more digestible, understandable, and personalized for you. That's the first step. And then once again, as you're doing that, making it more engaging and fun. We talk about things like community. Community for us is macro and micro. On a macro level, it's inspirational and aspirational, and we highlight what HumanHuts do in the world. And by the way, there's a reason that we built a brand around something called a HumanHut. That there's an ethos to that. There's an expectation of, to be a HumanHut, these are the things you have to believe and the things you have to do. Part of that is you do actually have to do something. Like, there is no totally free ride, but let's make the ride, once again, more enjoyable, more interesting, and all that. And so on a macro level, community is inspiring and is very aspirational. But on a micro level, you got to think about how people operate in the world. And there's this saying that the five people you spend the most, you are the product of the five people you spend the most time with. Well, I would say in healthcare and wellness, those five people are super important in terms of your compliance. And so we create tools that allow you to include those five people in your health journey. I say all the time, if your spouse is not into your health journey, good luck being successful. If your
Yeah.
best friends are not on board, doesn't mean they have to do what you do. But if they're saboteurs, if they're not sort of like helping you, good luck getting this done. And so community is a big part of it. We also have a pretty robust coaching platform. That coaching platform has a bunch of components to it, certainly wearables integration. There's some automation and machine learning. There's a bunch of different things. But at its fundamental core, there is human connection at the most important moments. When a person is not doing what they need to do from a behavior change, compliance perspective, a human being appears. And there's a whole bunch that goes into that. And there's a whole bunch of technology and other things. But at its core, this idea that your watch, because it has some data, is going to get you to change your behavior. It's a tool, but it ain't gonna do it.
Yeah.
And we talk about things. I love Aura. I have an Aura ring. I've worn Whoop. I've got an Apple Watch. I have tons of data, and it's not a visualization problem. Aura and Apple, they do great jobs of visualization, but it's not enough. And the coaching's getting better, the AI is getting better. You can now, to your point, I know when I should go to sleep. I know what I should and shouldn't do before and after, but there's still something missing when all of that is driven by a quote unquote AI agent. And so, we do believe that coaching with a human connection is important. It's on top of a tech stack that includes all kinds of AI enablement and machine learning. It's paired with a community that keeps you wanting to be a part of it, creates a little bit of fun and engagement, and a few other things that are part of our secret sauce. But, people ask me all the time, why are you guys better? It's like, well, behavior change is the first thing out of my mouth. We actually get people to change their behavior and get better results. And so what kind of
Have
results do we get? You mentioned metabolic disease. Clearly, what's happening in this country is not working. People are becoming more and more obese. Metabolic disease is running rampant through society. There's a crazy high percentage of people that are pre-diabetic in this country and they don't even know it. And so, all right, let's go after metabolic disease. So in the HumanHut system, 86% of our clients that come to us pre-diabetic are no longer pre-diabetic within 6 months. And so how does that
big.
compare to traditional medicine? So traditional medicine would tell you that they can change less than 50% and it takes around 2 years. So great. We're twice as effective in a third of the time. There's a whole bunch that goes into that. It is not
Yeah.
by happenstance. It is not just the coaching platform. It's not just the data. It is a very complex system that we simplify for our clients that creates really great things. So an entrepreneur has to have conviction. You have to wake up and say, I know what we're doing is going to work.
I'd like to take a quick break and acknowledge one of our sponsors, Kenetik. I've been using it for the past 2 weeks, and it's genuinely changed how I think about focus and energy. It's a brain and body performance drink powered by ketones. There's no caffeine, no sugar, and no crash, just clean ketone fuel. What that means is you're literally giving your body and brain a more efficient energy source, the same kind it makes naturally when you're in deep ketosis. It's clean, it's stable, and you actually feel it, whether it's sharper focus, smoother endurance, and better recovery. The cool thing is it's backed by real metabolic research with 4 patents, not another stim or supplement pretending to be one. If you want to try it, head to drinkkinetic.com. That's DRINKKENETIK.com and use the code KCP ketones for 20% off. That's Kenetik, smarter fuel for your brain and body.
And so in the beginning of HumanHut, it was all about that conviction. Based on my life experience and all the folks that are a part of this with me, we think this is going to work, and we strongly believe that. We're past that now. We're past the conviction stage. We're at the assured stage now because the data we're seeing is real and it's showing amazing health outcomes. And so now we're not hoping we're going to be able to create healthier humans. We are creating healthier humans. We're doing it faster, and we're doing it to a greater degree than other options out there.
I love it. That's exciting. You're in like the post pre product market fit stage. Now it's kind of the scale component. One of the things I wanted to really dive into and kind of get to the how and the how is this going to work and how does it kind of get built. Brand kind of being the moat in the health and wellness world seems to be a really big deal and seems to be the leading way in a lot of these companies succeeding. You kind of touched this a little bit, but just going deeper, like how have you found that you were able to architect this belief at scale, whether it's information, dissemination, and then finding good ways to distribute information, but overall, how were you able to create this belief at scale?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think having a brand that is compelling and that viscerally connects to people is like a non-negotiable. You have to have that. And I actually find that in the medical space, people do a very poor job of it. And I see some of the names of these businesses and I'm like, the fuck does that mean? I don't even know what that
Yeah,
word is. And it's very esoteric and obtuse and I'm not going to name some of the ones that I am kind of ridiculing right now because I'm not a big believer in ever saying anything negative about a competitor. But we wanted to do the opposite. Once again, we put a ton of effort and energy into thinking about, how to create a brand, i.e., how to do this thing we call HumanHut and HumanHut Health. There's a real ethos around it. Once again, like when you read the things that it takes to be a humanot, you kind of are left with the impression, well, of course I want to be a humanot. And of course I get why that is a better way to approach my health and wellness. And to be quite frank, it helps us keep you accountable because if you buy into the philosophy and the ethos and then you don't do something, it's a lot easier to go back to you and say, hey, here's the deal. Here is the sort of social um, framework. We do X, you do Y, and the X plus Y creates great results. And so now that you know what Y is, if you're not doing some of these things, like, of course, we're not getting the results we want to do. So, it just helps people get on the same page. It helps people connect. And then once again, it's got to be something that is noble. Like, when I kind of think about the mission, we used to use a number of years. We used to say we're trying to add 20 good years of living to our clients' lives so that they can make greater societal impact. And so the idea is that it's not just adding 20 years of good living, it's adding 20 years of good living when people are at the height of their powers, when they have the most resources, they have the most wisdom, they have the most connections. And so some of our clients are very powerful people. And if I add 20 years to their lives, it has an outsized impact on society. And
interesting.
so, and
Yeah, that's
that's
a great
not to
point.
say people are more important than other people. The school teacher that gets to teach for 10 more years, that's massive societal impact. And so, people resonate with an idea like that. It's something they can emotionally connect with. It's something they can relate to. And so That's just the way I feel about it. I would be horrible at building a company that didn't have a brand that people viscerally and emotionally connected with. I said there's lots of ways to make money. I could go open storage units on the side of the highway and probably make more money or easier money, but I don't have any interest in that. I want things that have societal impact, that are emotionally, viscerally, um, you know, worthy of connecting to, and I do think that's a pretty big moat.
It's very refreshing to hear other people kind of structure their whole lives, at least their whole work lives, around this kind of concept of impact. I'm constantly pitching this type semi altruist belief, and in many rooms it gets kind of weird looks, but I'm glad to hear it's a common one across entrepreneurs.
Well,
What
I'll
what
tell you.
is like
Let me tell you one funny way before you ask this next question that it manifests. So
yeah
literally, I had a person in my marketing team a few months back come up and pat me on the belly, and he's like, "Hey, man, it's about time." And I was like, well, "That's weird. Time for what?" And he goes, come on, man. Like, it'd be really nice if you could lose 10 pounds. And I was like, whoa, man, that's a bold statement. By the way, one of our development partners had the same conversation with me separately. And he was like, listen, you're the CEO of HumanHut. You're the poster child for all this. And on 90% of things you do, you're out there doing crazy stuff still. Everything that you want to do in life, you can do. Like, I have a great sex life with my wife. I have a great physical life with my friends. I'm still doing adventures. There's no physical activity that I can't go out and do that I want to do. But they're right. They were like, come on, man, like, live the human lifestyle. Now, I'm quick to tell them that the human lifestyle does not mean perfection. It's it is more about, can you do all the things you want to do? But I just thought it was funny. And also, I was very proud of the fact that both my partner and my employee could operate in a way that they could say something like that to me. I suspect there are
yeah
some CEOs that would have said, "Hey, shut the F up," like, come
yeah
on. But
yeah.
they were right. It's like, okay, I'll do better. And I have done better. I've been really focused. I haven't had dessert in 90 days. And
There
I
you
love
go.
ice cream. Yeah.
No, I mean, like, on that point for another second is what's so fascinating about health and wellness and healthcare, especially preventative health, is my co-founder and I we had long conversations about what we find impactful, and it was the same kind of conversation. There's a lot of ways to make money, but you have like a certain lifespan, certain health span. Spending it doing something that's going to impact millions is kind of this north star that is so much more exciting, and that's why I'm also pitching a lot of the youth. A lot of really really bright, young, capable people that are thinking about their careers. I'm constantly making this pitch to go into impactful industries instead of going to sell some kind of B2B SaaS to some little optimization for a
Yeah.
company that's making billions of dollars. Why not go change lives and make people healthier, live longer?
So we have
I
a
love
we
it.
have a saying in the company that I've used, and I do think you have to balance emotion with logic. But the saying I say all the time to anybody I'm hiring is, a day that I don't cry is a day that I don't feel. A day that I don't feel is a wasted day. And I'm like, you got to be ready for that. First of all, you're going to see me cry. And I went to Ranger School. I'm married to a West Point grad. I've done very hard things. Like, it's not about pain and not doing hard things. I'm not crying because of hard things. I'm crying because I can really connect to, like, seminal emotional things, and it's authentic and it's real. And my larger point is, number one, be prepared for it, because you're going to see the CEO of the company cry.
Yeah.
It's gonna be around things that are important to me. It's like, it's an employee having a baby. It's an employee getting their first house. It's a health outcome for a patient. It's even sometimes very silly things. My wife looks at me all the time and says, "Why, for gosh sake, why are you crying about that?" And I'm like, it just touches me. But the larger point I say is that, listen, come here for the right reasons. I want interesting people and interested people who are passionate. So interesting's obvious. You got to be interesting to work with. You don't want to work with dull people. Interested is you have conviction around things in life that you want to lean into. And passionate is that you do it with zeal. And those are the kind of people that tend to be able to emotionally connect with things. And so I say, whether you physically cry or metaphorically feel something, that's all I care about. Because if you don't, then why are you working here? Why are you
Yeah, it's
working
true.
on this? And it's
I
to
mean,
your
that's
point about the software projects that you know, a random SaaS project that optimizes, once again, self-storage units. You can make money doing that, but I would never in a million years advise somebody to go do that.
It's the beauty of humanity to
Yeah.
focus on this kind of thing. I love it. What is like I'm just curious, like the specificity. What is a branding decision you guys made, either at HumanHut or Restore, that changed a lot of things that really built this brand that was much easier to love and got that emotional reaction out of people?
Um, well, I think at HumanHut, we highlight outcomes a lot. And I think that people can really relate to some of the things that we do for our clients. Because once again, they're seminal things. Like it's the ability to lean into your kids more, your grandkids more. It's the ability to have more energy and more ability to build a company. It's all these things. They're you can relate to, man, those days when I don't have the energy to fathom going and doing this, or the days when, man, I want to go spend time with my kids, but I'm just tired and beat up. People can relate to all these different use cases. And what we say is, okay, figure out what yours are and then use Humanot to make your ability to do those even better. And then let's go share the stories with everybody. We don't have to be clever from a marketing perspective. Just highlight the stories, man. These are real and everyone can relate to them on some level. And in some cases, like very viscerally. And so that is what we're trying to make the foundation of our brand. By the way, to date, I think our social media effort has been weak. We've got these stories, but what you will see over the course of the next 90 days is a dramatic transformation that does feature our client outcomes. And I think you don't have to ever, like I said, be too clever or make stuff up. That stuff kind of tells it tells the story itself.
So you think folks like the outcome, whatever the business is supposed to provide, actually showing the fact that that value was provided,
Well,
is this
some
kind of
businesses the
branding?
outcomes are more interesting. Like I said, the in the health and wellness, in the preventative health and wellness, health optimization space, I think people can on some level all relate to this notion of hurting, whether it's joint pain or something else, being tired, um, you know, brain fog, intellectual, the like, kind of the joke of, man, that was an old guy moment. I can't remember the
Yeah.
name of this person that I just told you was a good friend. I mean, everyone can relate to these things because it's happened to them. And listen, you're a little bit younger than me. Um, when you're older, you still think of yourself as a young person. Like I still wake up every day and feel in my mind like the 30-year-old that wanted to change the world and has done all the things he's done. But I'm not 30 years old anymore. I'm 56. And,
Yeah.
you can kind of fight the dying of the light, so to speak, or you can sort of succumb to the things that naturally happen. Um, I'm a big fan of fight the dying of the light because you really can. It's to make it quite a little more real, I say, if you haven't been your 30-year high school reunion yet, but when you go to your 30-year high school reunion, you're going to walk into a room and there are going to be two kinds of people. On the one side of the room, there are going to be people that you look at and say, who the hell are these old people? Like they should not be at the same reunion as me. Then you'll look on the
Yeah.
other half of the room and you'll go like, oh, there my people are. And they're the ones that have taken care of themselves. They haven't stopped moving. They've kind of made these foundational choices again and again and again, day after day. And so on a visceral level or on an intellectual level, everyone can relate to the idea of, hey, my friend that took care of themselves, they are in a much better place than my friend who didn't. And when you hit like 55 and up, it becomes so like bifurcated and
Yeah.
it's this downward spiral where you're literally thinking at 56, 57. I've got friends that are dying. They're
Yeah.
dying of heart
It's crazy.
attacks. They're dying of cancer. And some of that is unfortunately the vagaries of life. And, cancer in particular, it's all about early detection and it's a little bit random. But some of this other stuff, metabolic disease, heart disease, those are very manageable and very much up to you. And for whatever reason, people don't make the right choices around them.
No, I'm so interested to see how it plays out over time. I mean, we do have all these things coming out that really put an emphasis on health, but at the same time, we have a lot of counter forces, right? I mean, maybe people in the administration are trying to fix some of them, but um, we have a lot of counter forces, whether it's even the there is a good way to eat in the right way with nutrition, but then everything you buy is kind of it's difficult to factor out what's real, what's not. The physical part is easy, but there's a lot of kind of counter forces, despite the fact that we're seeing a massive trend of getting healthier and healthier. I'm curious how you guys filter for new opportunities and what you decide to do. I'm guessing there's some like medical approach here, but when you built HumanHut, when you built Restore, uh, there's like a foundational. We're talking a lot about outcomes. Here's what we want to achieve, but there's so many options, and as you said yourself, in healthcare, it can get really complicated because everybody's so different. How do you guys think about what's actually put into the process? We have the foundational three. You want to sleep well, you want to exercise, and you want to eat well. Beyond that, how to even filter and plug and play into those? How does that all get like brainstormed, and what's that process like for you guys internally?
Yeah, I would say at Restore, we were less sophisticated about it. At Restore, if you take it back 10 years, it was a time when sort of the word biohacking had just started bubbling up. And some of these modalities like cryotherapy were very nascent at the time. And so it was, I found it to be a lot easier to figure out what to pull under one roof. And we were the first to pull, order of magnitude 10 things under one roof that could all be called sort of preventative health or biohacking. I didn't like using the term biohacking because I thought it was too narrow. And there was a simple construct on day one. It was like, what do I feel good about? Like literally, the story of Restore is I was going to lunch with my wife one day, and one of her friends walked by and said, "Hey, Stace, I'll see you after lunch. I'm going to do cryo." And I was like, "Cryo? What's cryo?" Um, that sounds better than lunch. And I went, and
Yeah.
it made me feel incredible. And I was like, holy crap. Like, who would have thought that you kind of intuitively know from your sports days that ice baths make you feel better. But I was like, okay, there's something to this. And then it was very obvious some of these other things like red light therapy and hyperbaric oxygen therapy and IVs. They were pretty obvious. We did get more sophisticated as we got bigger. We created what we called Restore Labs. Don't think of it as a white trench coat kind of lab. It was more a commercialization lab. And so, does it fit in the space? Is it sort of stacking on top of something else to provide even better outcomes? We had a construct that had several criteria. At HumanHut is so much more complex because, whereas Restore, I use the education analogy. Restore is kind of elementary school. By the way, elementary school is great. Everybody has to go. It's the foundation for everything. And if you're not doing heat and cold and pressure and those sort of things, you're kind of missing out on some great benefits. But it only goes so far. HumanHut is very complex medical interventions, functional medicine, all those sort of things. And so um, it required a higher level of intellectual capacity. It required a more sophisticated team. Um, and so we have what I say the right balance where you had to build an incredible corporate business team because you're going to scale this complex business. And so you need people who've done it and have that high level of track record. But we also, on the clinical side, had to have great doctors who for 20, 25 years lived this and built things and 25 years of regenerative medicine, 25 years of women's health, hormone health, sexual health. And so we just had to build a much higher level team. And that team is really good at processing the quote unquote science and then knowing the right balance because you can't be science perfect. You got to be science informed or you're going to be waiting too long for things. And so just have a great team, a construct that can kind of stand the test of time, a construct that everyone in the organization understands, and then it's just how good is your compass at staying aligned with your construct. Yeah,
Very nice.
exactly.
Well, super cool. I mean, that's really insightful. I mean, I'd love to jump a little bit of a rapid fire. I have like a few interesting
Sure.
questions for you. Ask them. Give me kind of your first thoughts that come to mind. What's your most contrarian belief?
Um, well, in the world of AI, just to kind of take a very topical thing, I believe the more effective AI is, the more people will require human connection. And so I'm not a believer that AI can replace humans. And I think the things that humans do uniquely well. And so the more AI and technology becomes a big part of a company, of an interaction, the more important the human part of that becomes, especially in healthcare.
Outside of health, where do you see the most opportunity today?
Um, oh my gosh, where do I see the most opportunity? Um, I don't know, man. I tell you, my brother-in-law came and visited the other day, and he grabbed my son who's 18 and my daughter who's 16, and he launched into a 4-hour tutorial on crypto. And so literally my kids they've been entrepreneurs since they were 11 and 13 respectively. And my daughter has a very successful business. She makes about 50 grand a year and she puts that
Very
away.
nice.
So for teenagers, I don't have to give them money. They've built their own thing and it's quite lovely. They literally took all of their money that they've saved for years and they put it into crypto. And I was like, oh
I
my gosh, I wanted to
Yep.
punch my brother-in-law. But by the way, I loved it, and who cares? The consequences at that age, but, what I did appreciate was that it wasn't sort of do this as a get rich scheme. He did take the time to really delve into the foundational, sort of, genesis of how it happened and what's happening in the world. And then they got to make their own choice and they're all in. They're so there
I
are
love it.
probably some
I
more
actually
interesting things, but I just found that just happened last, few days, and I thought it was pretty funny.
It's a funny one because, I'm a few years older than your kids, and now I have a kiddo of my own, but, I actually did something quite similar. I built a company before this that I'm building now, and it wasn't venture backed. Now we're building a venture backed, much bigger thesis. But
Yeah.
the previous one we bootstrapped to a good size. We actually sold the company, and I had a few interesting mentors in my time in my life, and they were very bullish on crypto. I'd put a lot into Bitcoin, which now seems to be a
Yeah.
great decision. But a lot of
Yeah.
people that got into like the NFT space were not too hot. So it's funny that this seems to be a cool trajectory around that age. I love it. Um,
Yeah, at that age, like I do tell people all the time, make mistakes, man. Like if you're not making mistakes at that age, then you're not trying hard enough. And I always tell people, don't make mistakes out of lack of rigor because you're lazy. Don't make the same mistakes over and over again, and don't make existential mistakes. That's all I really care about with my kids at this point. Like make mistakes, but don't make mistakes that are going to kill you. Those are easy.
yeah,
Those are around drunk driving, those are around
yeah.
drugs, those are around, and fortunately, growing up in a health optimization household, the idea of my kids drinking alcohol or things like that is so foreign to them, but there's other stuff, driving too
Yeah, yeah,
fast, and don't
yeah,
make
yeah.
the existential mistakes.
Yeah, no, that's super fair. Now, last quick rapid fire for you. What was the best thing that your parents ever taught you?
So I tell the story all the time. It's like my dad didn't give me a lot of lessons around the birds and the bees or anything else. He basically said, you have three basic rules, and then everything else is up to you. My basic rules were literally get straight A's, don't get a girl pregnant, and don't drink and drive or get in a car with someone drinking and driving. Everything else is up to you. No curfews, no whatever. And then the only other lesson I'm gonna tell you is this. Remember I said these words, "There's no debtor's prison in the United States." And I was like, "All right, Dad, explain that." What he was basically saying is that if you're an entrepreneur, go try things, and if you fail, there's no real penalty. It's not like the rest of the world where if you fail, you're crushed and can never be an entrepreneur, or even worse, like you're a criminal because you went bankrupt. He's like, I'm not advocating that you go bankrupt. I'm just telling you, take big chances, do it with enthusiasm, work hard, do everything you promise your investors, put your money in the same level as their money so there's never a conflict. And if it doesn't work out, man, there's no debtor's prison. You get to wake up the next day, look them in the eye and say, "Hey, this didn't work. I'm going to try something else." And you do it with enthusiasm, and at some point you'll hit it and you'll get a good one. And my dad, I don't think ever really hit it in the way that he expected, but till the day he died, man, he was so enthusiastic. He was bankrupt multiple times. I grew up in a household with multiple bankruptcies, and I will tell you, my dad's enthusiasm never wavered. My
That's
dad's, like,
amazing.
zest for trying a new idea never wavered, and he kind of inculcated that in me, and I'm my wife is like, "I don't know how you can just have this conviction and how you can be so enthusiastic during some of the hard times." And I'm like, "Listen, what happens if it fails? Nothing. Like, you're still gonna love me, I hope. We're still gonna have beautiful kids. We're never gonna be on the streets because of your parents and my parents. I got a sister that would, go to the ends of the earth to help me, and you do too. It's like, we got great friends. What's the worst thing that can happen to us?" And
It's
so
true.
depends on your currency. If your currency is money and that's all you care about, you can lose it. If your currency is all the other stuff and you realize the real context of what the true consequences are, there's really nothing to be afraid of. And I have young kids all the time ask me, like, when should I do it? It's like, I got an idea, but I'm just afraid. When should I do it? And I'm like, here, let me give you some context. And I can't tell you. It's up to you, man. But the consequences, because most of these kids asking me, they tend to come from good families. They're very educated and all that. I'm like, what are you worried about? Like, you're not going to be
Yeah.
on the street. Now, I take that for granted. There are some folks that they're an island, man. And if they go bankrupt and they lose everything, they don't have this great family or network to fall back on. But I think people
So
overestimate the consequences of failing in business. I'll hire people that have failed even more readily than I'll fire someone who hasn't, because someone who's failed has knowledge that's invaluable.
oh, I love it. Yeah, it's the beauty of this country. Well, Jim, thank you so much for hopping on the Silken Fox Pet podcast. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Mitchell, it's great.